Hello, BookTube. Today I will be covering Dune by Frank Herbert. Let's begin. Dune is a book that had been on my radar for a long time, and I kind of like brushed it off. I wasn't super interested in reading back when I first heard of it. No, I actually had a friend who was super into the entire Dune series, and he kept recommending me to read it. But I never did because I just thought that it was like the book's pretty long. I was like, that's too big for me. I can't handle that. It's a challenging read. But I'm super glad I eventually did it. And yeah, this book is pretty much about Paul Atreides. I'm sure most of you've seen the movie now. Paul Atreides and his mom, they moved to this desert planet called Arrakis, as seen here. Picture your desert, and their family gets attacked by the Harkonnens. That's how the Harkonnens are like a rival family. They live on Giedi Prime, and this book is pretty much just the retelling of how Paul and his mom overcome the challenges, make friends with the local tribe of Fremen, and how they are able to overcome the Harkonnens and put an end to the Harkonnen occupation of Dune or Arrakis, as the planet's called. But this book it's quite thick, as you can see. There's a lot of meat to it, and it is quite slow. So if you're not into books that are slow burn, like this book really ramps up towards the end. But the slow burn in this book is probably one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. Like this book is like 800 pages, I think, which small text size too. It just makes it took me a long time to read this. I think it took me like 20 days to read this book. I was reading pretty constantly. I think the audiobook is like 40 hours or something like that. It's insane. But yeah, this book, it blew me away by the time I was done with it. And something I'd like to add is that with that same friend, he invited me to his birthday party, and we actually watched the Dune in theaters for the Dune Part 2. So I'd watched Dune and Dune Part 2 before I started reading this book. And I will offer my perspective as someone who read the book after watching the movie, because I think that makes a difference in how you enjoy this book, because there are some significant differences, and obviously I love the movie. I think most people do. The movies are so good. I think Dune 2 is probably the best movie I've ever watched, unobjectively. But this book is structured very differently to the movie. Like, they have a lot of the same story beats, but they don't happen in the same place. They don't happen, like, in the movie. And maybe, like, you'd expect it to be 75% of the way through this book, but something happens at 90% of the way through this book. And it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting that to take so long to get there. But there was definitely a lot of dramatization in the movie of the fight scenes and the character development that is not in this book. Because this book it's mostly about the ecology, the world, the lore of Dune, like the planet Arrakis. And Herbert does such a good job of fleshing out this world and making you feel like you're like one of the Fremen, like you're wearing a still suit, going across the desert and hunting for spice. And I love that so much. Like, I love it when I can escape and truly escape into a world and become one of the citizens there. I can feel like I could survive in this world. I feel like I have the know-how. Like, this book provides me with all the tools and resources I feel like I would need to survive, which I honestly love. And I can understand now why it's such a cornerstone of sci-fi, because when I was reading it, I was like, so many of my favorite sci-fi series and movies, they didn't steal per se, but they based a lot of their ideas off of this, like Star Wars, like it's just, well, you'll see later with like Children of Dune and stuff, like the twins and things. But this book really is like the origin of almost all the modern sci-fi ideas, and I think it's such a cool thing that this book, a book that's so well written, could be that for the entire sci-fi genre, like this entire, like the base building block. It's like the 2x2 Lego piece of the sci-fi world. I'd have to say by far the best part of this book, after watching the movie, was definitely like the world building and the world, like the ecology, because Frank Herbert, there will be like an interaction between characters, and one tiny thing is mentioned, and he'll go on like a multi-page or paragraph tirade about how that aspect of the world interacts with everything else. Like, there was a scene where a character was out in the desert, and they talked about like vultures and like sand blows and like all this stuff, and like stuff that wasn't really necessary to understand the lore and the world of Dune, but it just made it feel so much richer, so much deeper. and it made you really understand how much there is to this desert. Like it's just like I felt like when I before I read it and before I watched the movies, like it's a desert. How much could you pack into a movie about just a desert? But he really manages to make this all 800 pages of this book feel like it's an action packed story, where well not action packed. It's just like full of like world building and exposition, where it makes me fall in love with the characters and the story, and like if I find it hard to actually like fall in love with a story if I don't like the world. Like I know people like I can sacrifice bad characters as long as I'm getting a super engaging world. And I know some people are the opposite. Like I've seen videos where people mention that they can't get into a book if the characters are bad, but the world building is super cool. Like I find a way to make sure that I can, because I just build the world. I imagine it, all the aspects of the world interacting with each other, and I think it's just so cool how he managed to like roll it all up, have good characters, have deep motivations, and have like still a super ecologically diverse world, all wrapped up in this book. It's just amazing. Now, I'm sure many of you might be wondering, how does it differ than the movie? Obviously, the movie's gonna be a little bit different because this is a pretty hard book to adapt. I'd say I think Denis Villeneuve did a pretty good job of it, but this book is very different from the movie. Like it has the same story beats, like I said earlier, but like there's a final battle scene in the movie that maybe lasts 45 minutes of the movie, which would probably be about 100 pages of this book, but it literally takes place in like 2 pages. It's like he glosses over that just to get to like the actual interpersonal and political aspects of this book. And I think branching off of that, the political aspects of this book are some of the best parts because there are scenes where maybe two characters are talking, they're very high up in the power scheme, and they're just able to like they show off how powerful they are, and they can like they threaten each other. There's betrayals, there's like murders, there's assassination attempts. It's just like it's so interesting to me. Like I love the politics side of this book, and I think that's the reason why I also love Dune Messiah. Spoiler alert: I'm gonna make a video about the Dune sequels eventually. I think maybe not individual reviews for all of them, but like maybe a review of the three I've read, and then maybe talking about whether or not I'll read Chapter House and Heretics, and sort of just wrapping up whether or not you should read the sequels, which I think you should, but I'll go in detail about that sometime else. But I think that this book, it just the political aspect of it, it's unparalleled in any other book I've read except for Dune Messiah, which is literally just politics. But like I'm a pretty big politics person in life. I'm interested in like I used to think that was gonna be my career path, but I think that it's not gonna be anymore. I'm like a science person now. But this book just overall it just blew me away. I think that I would recommend reading the book before the movie because that's how it should be normally. But you really get to see Frank Herbert's vision with this story and with this world. And I think that it's very important before watching Denis Villeneuve's interpretation of the story that you understand where Herbert wanted to go, wanted to do at first, because it gives you a deeper understanding of how hard it would be for Denis Villeneuve to adapt the movie into a screenplay. And which obviously, it's like 6 hours total of film, which is crazy considering this is like an 800-page book. Like I don't think I've ever seen a book this long take. I mean, yes, like Deathly Hallows, Harry Potter, that took 2 books or 2 movies, but yeah, I think that I would definitely recommend. I would 100% recommend reading Dune by Frank Herbert, and I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I don't think there's anything else I could have given it. Like it's so deserving. I was enraptured the entire time, and I 100% do recommend Frank Herbert's Dune.